It finally happened after months of trade speculation, months of drama, tanking the Vancouver Canucks season. We finally have a resolution, and they have finally traded forward JT Miller to the New York Rangers. It is another Friday night of craziness around the National Hockey League. While it's not a exact three-team trade like we got between the Hurricanes and the Blackhawks and the Avs when they shuffled around and got Mikko Rantanen to go from the Avalanche to the Hurricanes last Friday. It is three teams pulling off trades with big pieces going in every single direction. Let's start with this trade because this is the one that was kind of clogging up the entire trade market, right? This was the key to unlocking the 2025 trade season, and it finally went down on Friday night. The Vancouver Canucks trade JT Miller to the New York Rangers in a package that includes Erik Brannstrom and defensive prospect Jackson Dorrington. The Canucks, in exchange, get back forward Filip, defenseman Victor Mancini, and a conditional 2025 first-round pick, with the condition being it is top 13 protected, which means if the Rangers fall into the top 13 of the NHL draft, they have the choice as to whether or not they want to keep this year's pick and send the 2026 first rounder, or if they want to just give them this year's 2025 first round pick, which would be unlikely if they ended up with a top 15 pick. But that's the total trade. That's what finally got everything over the finish line. Let's talk both sides here before we get into the second trade that was made by Patrick Allvin, Jim Rutherford, and the Vancouver Canucks late last night. On the Rangers side of things, they get a bona fide top-line center in JT Miller when he's playing at his best, at least. That hasn't been this year because of all the drama going on with him and Elias Pettersson. He has 35 points in 40 games, and I know what you're going to say. That's still pretty good. It's not at the level that he has been in previous years. He's coming off of 3 straight 30-goal seasons. He's coming off a 100-point-plus season last year. So this drama, while it didn't turn him into a pumpkin, it has held him back a little bit this season. 9 goals. He's on pace for around 18 if he played a full 82. Again, a severe drop-off from a 30-goal guy. But now, who knows what it looks like. He gets over to the New York Rangers, a place that he played a large portion of his career with, and a place that he's been wanting to go and that has wanted him for a very, very long time. The only thing that I will say about the New York Rangers in this one is Chris Drury. I hope that you know for a fact that not only will JT Miller walk into that locker room and immediately mesh with everybody personality-wise, you better know that the 30-goal, 100-point JT Miller is stepping foot on that ice whenever he puts on the Rangers blue once again, because they took on his full contract. That was a big part, according to Frank Saravalli, of the Vancouver Canucks trading away JT Miller. They did not want to retain any of that 7-year, $8 million per year contract that JT Miller is only in year 2 of. Because, well, why would you? Why would you want to pay for the next 5 seasons for a player that is not on your roster? So the Canucks, they offload that contract. The Rangers, they take it on in full. And that's my only thing about JT Miller in this trade. He better age like a fine frickin' wine. Even with the salary cap jumping up, which we got that news yesterday as well, the salary cap is just going to go up immensely over the next 3 seasons as long as the NHL continues on the trajectory that they have laid out. But even with that in mind, 5 more years at $8 million for a 31-year-old player. You better hope that he continues on this pace, because if not, a lot of people are going to look back at this trade and say, well, you didn't give up too much. You gave up a depth center, which we'll talk about. You gave up a young right shot defenseman that hasn't really been able to establish himself in the NHL. And you did give up a first round pick. But I think a lot of people are going to be looking at it more so and saying, man, how are we stuck with this contract if he indeed falls off a cliff? Again, he hasn't fallen off a cliff yet. I doubt he's going to fall off a cliff this season. I doubt he's going to fall off a cliff next season. But once you get into years 5, 6, and 7 of that deal, you better hope he ages like fine wine. That's all I'm going to say, because the Rangers, they got a piece that they're hoping helps them this year. They got a piece that hopes of bouncing back in a very, very mushy middle in the Eastern Conference. Shoot, this is a team that if they play at their best, they look like the team that went to the Eastern Conference Final last year. The problem is they haven't looked their best. Maybe JT Miller unlocks that for the New York Rangers. They also add Erik Brannstrom and Jackson Dorrington. Brannstrom is a puck-moving defenseman that doesn't really use the term defense in his game very much, as you can probably tell. That didn't jive well with Rick Tocchet and the way that he wants his team to play. So he gets to a new home. He gets to a home in which he might be able to be utilized a little bit more, or at the very least get more opportunity than he did in Vancouver. Where meanwhile, Dorrington, not much on him. Young defensive prospect playing at Northeast University. It is what it is. It is a young prospect that they will see if they can turn into something in a couple of years. Let's go over to the Canucks side of things. They finally offload Miller, which is probably the biggest part of this entire move for them. Not the return, the fact that they offload JT Miller. They create some peace within their locker room because they're in a very similar situation to the New York Rangers, right? They're just outside of that playoff spot. They're battling with Calgary. They're battling with Los Angeles. And they are a team that, if you put the pieces together, was very, very dangerous last year in the playoffs and should be very, very dangerous again this year if they can make the playoffs. Not only that, they free up space for another move that they would make later in the evening. We'll get to that in just a minute. But Filip is the big part coming back and the big part that the Vancouver Canucks are going to hold on to from this trade. He's a very good depth center, and I understand he's had some issues with concussions. It cost him almost all of last season, where he only played in 10 games in the regular season. But if he can stay healthy, this is a good young piece in your bottom six. He's a good center that, if called upon, could probably handle second-line center minutes, but more than likely is going to be a very, very good third-line center for any team that he's on. He, again, 20 points in 40 games played this season while still trying to recover from not playing any of last season. I think this is a kid who still has a very bright future ahead of him. And I think because of everything that happened in New York, because of how busy it is in New York, this is a really good move for him as a player. I think it's going to unlock some things in Filip. And I think while you're not going to get the same offense that JT Miller gave you, that isn't coming anywhere in this trade or the next that they made. I do think it helps bolster your depth, and I do think it gives you a good young piece to help kind of grow with what is already, I wouldn't say a young core, because Brock Besser and Elias Pettersson are getting a little bit older. Quinn Hughes has been around the block a couple of times, but he kind of fits in line age-wise and progression-wise with that group of players. So I like the addition of Filip. I know that everybody was talking it should be Alexis Lafreniere that comes back in this trade, and I honestly thought it would have been whenever talk started kind of heating up again between the Rangers and the Canucks. But Filip is a good piece. He's not Lafreniere. I'm sure the Rangers fans are ecstatic that they get to keep on to the former first overall pick. But I do like the fact that the Canucks get somebody like this in return, because it's similar to what we talked about last week when it came to Colorado Avalanche and Mikko Rantanen. Everybody in the league, and this even more so, knew that something had to happen, knew that you had to get rid of JT Miller, which was going to negate a lot of what you were going to get in the return. I like the fact that they were able to get a first-round pick. We'll talk about that in a second. I like the fact that they were able to get a guy like Filip, and I like that they added a nice young right-shot defenseman, too, with some pretty good size in Victor Mancini. Mancini himself hasn't looked great at the NHL level, but he's still very young. Defensemen take longer to develop in the first place, and secondly, I think he's a much better fit than an Erik Brannstrom for a hockey team that's coached by Rick Tocchet. Right? He's going to like that size. Mancini has good offensive instincts, so it's not like you're getting a pylon either. So I like that addition. I like that change of scenery for Victor Mancini. Overall, like I mentioned, the Canucks had to make this move. Everybody in the league knew they had to make this move. Shoot, I think everybody was just waiting for the Canucks and the Rangers to finally shake hands and say this deal is done, because everybody knew that's where they were going to go, or at very least, that is most likely where they were going to go. So they get the deal done. They get back what they could. And I think, like I said, the biggest part of this for the Vancouver Canucks, you offload JT Miller, you create peace in the locker room, which could hopefully move the pieces you already had forward a step more than they already were. And you free up a little bit of that cap space for just especially years 4 through 7 of that deal. But this year, next, you open up a little bit of cap space. And as you could expect, with Jim Rutherford, it didn't take long for him to utilize that cap space, and it certainly didn't take long for him to trade away that first-round pick. Later in the evening, The Vancouver Canucks struck a deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins to acquire Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. The full trade is as follows. The Pittsburgh Penguins acquire forward Danton Heinen from the Vancouver Canucks, as well as right-shot defenseman Vincent Desharnais and Swedish forward prospect Melvin Fernstrom, as well as that conditional first-round pick. So the pick goes from New York to Vancouver at about 8 p.m. last night, and then at about midnight Eastern, it goes from Vancouver back to the East Coast and lands with the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that are deeply entrenched in a rebuild, yet still trying to perform this year and next year because they have Crosby. They're in a weird situation. And this trade for them services both masters there, right? They get Danton Heinen for this year to kind of make up for that roster spot that they emptied with Drew O'Connor. They get Vincent Desharnais, who is a big semi-physical defenseman, right? He utilizes his physicality. He does body check. He does clear bodies in front, but he is not going to be somebody that's laying out like the Edgar Snyder and Associates hit of the game. If you're a Penguins fan, you know what I'm talking about there. But they get a physical defenseman. They get a big body on the back end. Those two pieces for this year and next. And then they get a young prospect to add to an ever-growing pool in Melvin Fernstrom, and they get that conditional first-round pick, which is huge for the Penguins. In return, the Vancouver Canucks, in addition to adding Filip, in addition to adding Victor Mancini from the New York Rangers, they get another piece to their bottom six in Drew O'Connor. O'Connor, similar to Mancini, is somebody that I feel like fits the mold of a Rick Tocchet hockey player. He's a big body. He's got a lot of skill. He's got a lot of speed, I should say. He does have some skill. Showed it late last season, whenever he was playing extended minutes with Sidney Crosby. But for the most part, he's going to be a bottom six guy. So not only do you add Chytil for your bottom six, maybe Chytil has to bump up to the top six because they lost a center in JT Miller. I digress. All in all, Chytil is a good bottom six, middle six addition. O'Connor is a good bottom six, middle six addition that can kill penalties. He plays well at 5-on-5, has especially been playing well over the last couple of weeks on the third line for the Penguins, and adds some of that high-intensity forechecking that the Vancouver Canucks usually like to create offense with. On defense, it's a full restructure, right? Brannstrom's out the door, and I'm trying to think of the other defenseman that they traded away. Oh, right in front of me. Vincent Desharnais is out the door. In return, they get Mancini, who's going to need a little bit of work, but they get Marcus Pettersson, who is a player that the Vancouver Canucks have coveted ever since Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin walked in the door. Those trade rumors started. And on the Penguin side of this, they knew. They knew they were trading away Marcus Pettersson. They knew more than likely that Vancouver was going to be the destination because Vancouver has been interested in this guy for a very, very long time. So you get Pettersson as a shutdown defenseman that you can put maybe on the second pairing with Filip. That way you have Quinn Hughes, Marcus Pettersson on the left side, and on the right side, you have Filip, and on the top, I cannot think of it off the top of my head. Let me pull it up real quick. But you restructure your defense and you try to kind of solidify your top four of the defense because you're going to have Tyler Myers, who's also going to be on the top there next to Quinn Hughes. I like it for the Canucks. I do. I think in a situation that was rotten from the start, where they had to trade away a guy that scored 100 points, they had to kind of make lemonade out of crap, to be completely honest. And while they didn't get everything back, right, they did have to give away the first round pick that they got in exchange for JT Miller. They helped solidify their top four on defense. They added a couple of nice pieces to the bottom six. And more importantly, they opened things up for the future of the franchise. I think that's huge. I know that they lost a big piece in JT Miller, but something had to give there. I mean, when Jim Rutherford's going into the media and saying, yeah, there's no solution where both of them stay in the locker room and it just gets fixed. It had to get changed. It had to get moved. It had to get done. And finally, right before the turn of the calendar from January to February, and a little bit after February, in the case of that Penguins versus Canucks trade, it finally gets done, and they can finally move on. Hopefully it unlocks Elias Pettersson, and you look at both of these franchises as far as the Rangers and the Canucks in similar positions. Out of the playoffs, need to get into the playoffs. We'll see if this move unlocks anything for both of them. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you liked this video, make sure that you like, share, subscribe to my channel, Nick Belsky on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.